Welcome back. Thanks again for joining us for another episode as we continue studying the Word of God together. We are in the book of Daniel. We're Daniel chapter 2. Just for a little bit of context here in this section, we have a situation where Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have kind of passed the initial testing, the 3-year testing period in chapter 1, and now they are considered one of the wise men of Babylon. And there's been a scenario where the King Nebuchadnezzar, has had a dream that, as we talked last time, is a warning from God, a vision from God. And so we talked a little bit yesterday why God would even give one to a pagan king. But today what we find is a scenario where this pagan king is reacting. He is convinced, rightfully so, that the men in front of him don't really have an answer, and he is insistent on getting this answer. So in the process, he says if they can show him the dream and interpret it, well, they're all going to die. Well, that includes Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It includes those 3 men in this same scenario. And so what I want to look at, we're going to look over the next couple of minutes at Daniel's response. We'll see next time the dream interpretation, what we can learn from it. But really what I want to look at is I want to look at Daniel's response. One of the things that I think is important when we find ourselves with life-altering news or things that we have to make a serious decision on, I think one of the important things we need to do is just stop for a little bit, spend some time with God, and really seek the face of God to know what it is that He wants in our situation, in our life. And that's a situation we see here today with Daniel, and how he showed one of the reasons that God blessed him and these men so much is their willingness and their constancy to stand with God and stand for God and to really seek His face for the answers of life. So we're in Daniel chapter 2. I'm going to go back a little bit for context and start at verse number 12. It says, because of this thing, the king was angry and very furious, and commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. So the decree went out, and the wise men were about to be killed, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them. So obviously, Daniel wasn't fully aware what was going on, but he was aware of his impending death as a result of what's going on. So what does he do? How does he respond? I love verse 14. It says, then Daniel replied with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. Now, this guy Arioch was only fulfilling his command, the command of the king. He's just doing his job. Maybe a job he enjoyed, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe he agreed with the instruction. I don't know. But what I do know is that in this time, when the king gave an instruction like this, you didn't have a choice. This is what you're supposed to do. And so this king is now this man is now following through, and he seeks out men who obviously at this point weren't even in the room, for whatever reason, not brought into the room the first time to give any instruction, but he sought them out. Okay, I got to kill all of you, and then he goes. And I love what Daniel does. He starts with prudence and discretion. He doesn't overreact. He doesn't freak out, as we might say today. He doesn't react. He responds. He stops a second. Wait, let me ask you a question. He begins to ask some valid questions. What's really going on? So he takes some time, and I love the idea of prudence. One of the things of the story of Daniel, all these men and others like it that have always intrigued me is the fact, again, they lived in a pagan society that did not trust or believe in their God. And yet in the process, you see how Daniel was able to excel by following God. I think sometimes we live in a day where we say, due to the pagan nature of the world and all this, our values just don't carry the weight. And I dare to say that just the opposite. Our values show something to this world that the world cannot. And I imagine that of all the things that this Arioch had to do, this was not the reaction that he maybe expected. So let's go on to verse 15. He decreed to Arioch the captain, why is the decree of the king so urgent? Then Arioch made the matter known to Daniel, and Daniel went in and requested the king to appoint him a time that he might show the interpretation to the king. So he comes in and he's setting a time. You don't just interrupt the king, no matter what position you hold. And so he comes in, he establishes basically an appointment with the king, and he says, at this time I will come give you an interpretation. Well, obviously the king is obviously more concerned about getting an answer or interpretation to the dream than he was following through with his reaction. I mean, he can always, kill this guy next day. So they agree, but that's when he comes out. He does it process wisely. He's not overreacting. But here's the part that I think that really for us as Christians we can pull from. Let's go down to, then he goes down to verse 17. It says, then Daniel went to his house and made the matter known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, and told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions might be destroyed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Now, here is the key thing, two things. There's a couple things in this section that I think are important. First of all, obviously, he made a point to go to God to look for the answer. The one thing that those men said to Nebuchadnezzar that was true was that there is no man that could answer this. The difference was these men's gods were fake, so they couldn't go and get anything from him. Daniel worshiped the true and only God, Jehovah, and he knew that if he wanted to, God could give him the answer. Remember, we talked about the fact that Daniel had been gifted with dreams and interpretations of dreams. So Daniel knew that if God wanted this, he could give him an answer. So he spends time with God, but then he brings in friends, his three friends, to do the same thing. And obviously, we can talk about the need to always go to God before any major things going on. When we've got things in our life, decisions we have to make, boy, may we make time to stop for a little bit and seek the face of God. Lord, what do you want? Go into his word. Just wait for him to give peace and direction. But the other thing he did that I think is so important, and a lot of times we skip in our Christian journey, is he went to other men to help him. He didn't do this alone. He went and said, I have a serious prayer request. And I don't know what it is in your life or what you've gone through or what you're looking at right now. Can I challenge you that one of the greatest things you can do as a Christian is to put people around you who that when you say, I need you to pray with this pray for this with me, that you know that they will. They won't just say, okay, I pray with you and walk away, forget. We all are guilty of that, but you understand what I mean by finding people who are committed in accountability, committed and mentorship, and committed in a prayer partnership with you. And that is something that I find to be vitally important. And it's easy. As a pastor, it's actually easy to be the one to not do this. And I encourage that we allow that into our lives. And this is a major part of what Daniel did as a great example to us. It's not just to go to God himself, go to God with his other men and plead for this happen. So we see in verse 19 that God had given Daniel the dream. And here is another one of Daniel's responses. Verse 20, "Then Daniel answered and said, Blessed be the name of God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and the light dwells with him. To you, O God my Father, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and might, and have now made known to me what we asked of you. For you have made known to us the king's matter." So he just goes and praises God. There's an absolute time of worship. Now, if you study out throughout Scripture, you're going to find that a lot of times in these situations, these men worshiped even if they didn't get the answer. But in this situation, he was prudent. He showed wisdom. He showed humility. He showed a bit of temperance. And then he goes and he brings his three friends in and he shows this time of going before God. And then he praises God. He recognizes that the answer he has been given was from God. It's not of his own ability. One of the things that I think is so powerful about worship, about remembering who God is, maybe even using, if you haven't done this, is a great tool, is to go through, maybe even use the phrase we looked at and just pray that to Jesus. The last part was specific to Daniel, but pray about the power. You think about what he did. He praised him because you put up kings, you've taken down kings. He reminds himself that Nebuchadnezzar is just a pawn in God's hand. And all this time in worship, you begin to see that he is reminded of the greatness of God. And in doing this, he's also reminded that none of what he's about to do or can do had anything to do with himself, and all 100% to do with God. And that to me is one of the greater aspects of prayer and that time of worship, is it puts God back on his throne, places me at the foot of his throne, and reminds me on a constant basis that anything good in my life comes from God, and I constantly need his strength for whatever it is he's put in my path. Well, I greatly appreciate the privilege you give to me to be part of your day. Stick with us as we'll look next time at the specifics of this vision and what it is that God told Daniel to tell the king, and how it influenced his relationship with the king and the future, and just what we can learn from it as well. Well, again, we greatly appreciate the time you've given us today. We look forward to seeing you again next time.